Let's make a video game. There are many contenders for the worst game ever made. Bubsy 3D, E.T. for the Atari 2600, Superman 64, Bubsy 3D again, and of course, The Last of Us Part 2. You might think you'd learn more about game design from studying good video games with sterling examples of what to do and how to do it, but you'd be absolutely correct, of course. But you can also learn from bad video games about what not to do. So I'm going to throw my hat into the ring of elite flubs in video game history and make the worst game in the world. Let's talk game design. It's going to be a platformer because they're the easiest genre to mess up, and the first thing we're going to need is a player character. There we go. Now, in a good platformer like Reiterate, which I'm currently developing and that you should watch the devlog series of and then wishlist on Steam, you don't actually control the player character. You control one of these little boxes which you, the player, cannot see. The reason for this is that the little box gives you a flat, consistent and easy to work with collision box that will always react in the same way. If you jump on the corner of a platform, you'll always have a corner of your collision box to make contact with it, and you'll always land on the floor. The animations are then laid over the top of this to give the illusion that your character is the one doing the platforming. So we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to give this brilliantly animated character the platform movement behaviour, so that sometimes his leg will be colliding with the ground, and sometimes it won't. This is going to make our platforming wildly inconsistent, which is brilliant. Speaking of wildly inconsistent, in a good game the height at which you jump will always be predictable and deterministic. Some games feature variable jump heights based on your speed, or how long you're holding down the jump button. So we're not going to do that. Instead, the height of your jump is going to change dynamically and be set to a randomly generated number. This means you'll never know if you can actually clear a gap or hazard, and will make the game tedious and frustrating, which is brilliant. Speaking of tedious and frustrating, if we are going to jump, then we're going to need to set a jump button. Common settings for this include the spacebar, the up arrow, or the W key. So we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to pick what I have been reliably informed is the worst possible button to set jump to, Shift. Marvellous. Now we need something to be jumping over. A good game gives you a variety of hazards and challenges that test your abilities in a multitude of ways, to surprise and delight you with their brilliant, clever level design. So we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to have spikes. Just spikes, just all spikes all the time. A smorgasbord of spikes. Too many spikes, really. Lots and lots of spikes. Now I realise we are making the worst game ever, but I still want it to be theoretically completable. So what we're going to do is give the player infinite double jumps. You can, if you want, jump as many times as you like. That way, even if it's frustrating, annoying, aggravating and stupid, hopefully the player will be able to get to the end eventually. Basically, I've remade Flappy Bird. This will also come in handy later on. You might have heard me say before that the worst thing a game can be isn't actually a bad game, because bad games can be entertaining for their badness. Go and play Ride to Hell Retribution and you'll see what I mean. No, the worst thing a game can be is boring, so we need to find a way of making our game incredibly dull. The first thing we're going to do for that is the setting of this level. We need somewhere that is interminably dull, that makes you sigh when you think about it, and where no reasonable human being would ever actively choose to either visit or, God forbid, live. That's right, we're setting this game in Swindon. But that's not tedious enough. This is going to be level 1, which is already bad not only by virtue of what we have done, but also due to what we haven't done. There's no tutorial, there's no introduction of mechanics, there's no thoughtful way of easing the player into the systems of the game. We have given absolutely no thought to the player's experience whatsoever. Now level 1 implies the existence of a level 2, which we'll get to shortly, and therefore we need to pass level 1. And what could be more tedious than having to redo level 1 over and over and over again to make any meaningful progress? So in order to get to level 2, let's make it so that the player has to complete level 1, I don't know, 10 times? Yeah, that'll do. Now if they can manage that, we need to reward them with something. And a good reward in video games is a cutscene. A reward in the worst game ever made would be an unskippable cutscene, with text that you can't speed up, that goes on for 5 minutes, and doesn't really mean anything. Excellent. And once that's done, we get to level 2. But first a word from our sponsor. Hello, I'm our sponsor. Yes, that's right, I'm sponsoring my own video because there's something I need to talk to you about. I'm publishing a video game. I didn't make it, but I have the great privilege of helping it get to Steam. You might have heard of it before. It's called Quickly Quackly and it's made by Jay, a good friend of mine who you might know from our Blackthorn Prod Game Jam entry. This video is all about making a bad platformer with horrible physics and tedious progression. Quickly Quackly is the exact opposite of those things. It's a fast-paced, reactive and highly satisfying retro-style platformer, with an aesthetic borrowed from the ZX Spectrum but without 4 years of your life spent waiting for a cassette tape to load. You have 13 seconds to complete each level, and while that sounds maddening, the game is so well designed and so well put together that you will feel encouraged and capable, which means Quackly will actually improve your self-esteem, probably. It's coming to Steam on the 9th of June, and if you're in any way interested in a good 2D platformer, you should check it out. Link is in the description to get it on your wishlist, which you're going to do, because you're a smart and attractive person. Well done. We now return to our regularly scheduled broadcast. Thanks Zane for sponsoring this video. Right, time for level 2. And for this I'm going to do something that I've often thought would be the pinnacle of awful game design. Timed, underwater, escort mission. Some games do timed sections very well. Quickly Quackly, for example, is coming to Steam on the 9th of June and gives you just 13 seconds to complete each level. Some games do not do timed sections very well at all, and the timing becomes frustrating, maddening, aggravating and generally bad for you. So we're going to do that. We're also going to set this level underwater, which will affect our players' manoeuvrability in a way that you'd expect from all the traditionally bad water levels in video game history. And then to that we're going to add a fish. The fish will mostly wander around you at a reasonable distance, but will occasionally just stop for no good reason, because that's what a bad escort mission is, forcing you to go back and pick up said fish before continuing on. This is, I think, possibly the worst thing I've ever made, and I'm actually very proud of myself. So we've got 2 levels, but what we really need is a dramatic climax to our awful video game. We need the traditional coup de grace. We need a boss fight. A good boss fight is a test of all the skills and abilities you've learned in the game up to that point, and a bad boss fight is not those things. An awkward boss fight will strip away everything you've been doing up until now, and instead introduce some new gimmicky mechanic that you've never seen before, and force you to use that. So obviously that's what we're going to do. Now it's a shoot 'em up, in space, for some reason, and there's no indicator of when the boss is getting hit, there's no separate hurt box on the player, there's no meaningful feedback at all, and the boss battle goes on forever because the boss has 1,000 hit points. In short, it's awful, which is brilliant, and that is the worst game ever made. Except of course, we're not done. We have no music, so obviously I had to compose a catchy little jingle that'll get stuck in your head and grate on your ears until you wish you were deaf. I'm not actually going to put any sound effects in because I wouldn't want to give the player any meaningful feedback for what they're doing, since that might be helpful, and we don't want that. I'm going to make it freely available as a web game that you can play in your browser, but I'm concerned that it might run a little bit too well. The worst game ever made probably shouldn't be very well optimized. So we're going to put a bunch of needless particles everywhere until the frame rate is somewhere in the single digits. And finally we need to give it a name. Something awful and meaningless. So let's go with Adventure Redemption Origins Revelation Unleashed 2, featuring Dante from the Devil May Cry series, and Knuckles. Now I'm not entirely stupid. I know the web version is usually not the best way to play a game with performance issues, so I'm also going to be offering downloadable versions as well, for full price. £69. Nice. Also the download version is exclusive to Mac. Please don't play this, and definitely please don't buy it. But do follow up on today's sponsor and wishlist Quickly Quackly on Steam, so that something good has come from this and you realise from this video just how grateful you should be that people like Jay are still making actually good video games. If you like this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more videos like this one, and I'll see you the next time I'm thinking, hey, let's talk game design.